I would like to welcome Jasmin. Jasmin Carter is a self-taught developer and a coding bootcamp graduate, specializing in full-stack development with a front-end focus. Jasmin's journey in the tech industry is fueled by a strong passion for continual growth and exploration. Her recent interests include exploring three.js for 3D graphics and interactive web development. Beyond coding, Jasmin delves into animation projects involving Blender 3D and Adobe After Effects, exploring the captivating world of motion graphics. Welcome, Jasmin. Welcome to Front and Queens. We're waiting for the amazing session that you're going to take today. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So to get started, we're going to be building a front-end mentor project together. So I'm going to share the front-end mentor project link in the chat. You'll also want to open your code editor if you want to follow along live. And don't worry if you get stuck or if I'm going too fast, you can always come back to this later because it's being recorded. And I will share like all of my code in the chat. So let me share my screen. Well, actually, before I share my screen, okay. So if you click on the link that I sent in the chat, it should take you to the base apparel coming soon page challenge, which is what we're going to build together. And you'll want to click on downloading the starter files and the Figma file. Okay. And then the next thing you'll want to do, if you're on a PC like me, you'll have to extract these files. Great. And then since this is my Figma, I'll actually import it into Figma first. So this is the project that we'll be building together. And I'm going to turn down this so I can see better. And the next thing I want to do is set up my workspace. So I already have a folder and a repository that I want to use set up. I wouldn't worry too much about setting up your repository right now. I will add a link in the chat if it's your first time setting up a repo. But really what we want to do together is just get our files into our code editor. So and if you can't open Figma, that is fine too. They include mockups in the starter code. So let's get our starter code into our workspace. I need to extract this file. And I'm going to drag this into my VS Code. Okay, and because I already have a repository that I want to use, I kind of want all of these things in my repository. Sorry for the little dings. There's like a better, faster way to do this. I just thought this was like the most convenient way. Since I'm using like just my desktop. And then I'm going to remove this because I don't need it. So all the files I need for the starter code are in here. And because I'm going to use CSS and JavaScript, I'm actually going to add those files. And okay, so let's look at what we have. Okay. So let's go over the starter code together and then let's look at the design. So in the starter code, they give you a design folder, and you don't necessarily need a Figma account because you can actually go into here and see what we're building. So it has the different desktop views and it has the mobile view, and it also has the active states. And then they have a folder for images. So all of the images and SVG files that we'll use for this project are in here. It looks like we have two different hero images. So that's good to note. And there's some type of background pattern, which like, if I look at this Figma file, that's really hard for me to see. They give us an HTML file. I'm going to get rid of this. It's related to this footer here, and because it's not a part of the design, I'm going to comment it out. And I'm going to let you decide how you want to style the footer, because that's about giving, recognition to Frontend Mentor who gave us this project. So want to give them credit. So I'm just commenting it out for now. And it looks like they just give us the text content. This is hard to see. So it looks like they just give us the text content in our HTML. And they have some README files to edit later. They give us all of these hints for how to style or the colors that they use, a gradient or two gradients, font family, font weight. So that's good to know. Okay. So now let's look at our Figma and just get a better idea of like of what we're building and what it looks like. Let's just make some general observations about what is going on in our design. So in our mobile view, what I'm seeing, I see like a singular column, and I also see like, honestly, I see like three distinct sections, which give me like an idea of how to set up my HTML. So I'm seeing like a header, a hero section, and a main section. And then in our error view, our error state gives us more information about our input tag here. So we have this input box, and then we have this icon in a button. And it looks like these things are on top of our input box. So I think that's important to note. And then we have some text here that they actually didn't give us in our starter file that we'll need to add for the error. And then let's look at the desktop view. So we can see two columns, and they're a little bit asymmetrical. And unlike the mobile view, everything in our main section is aligned to the left, and actually it aligns with the logo too. So if we look at these two things, this is more center aligned, and this is like left aligned. So it's given me some ideas about how I want to structure my page. Cool. And then the desktop view error state gives us more information about our form, in that like when you hover the button, it has a pointer cursor. Yeah, but other than that, it looks pretty much the same. So I think we're ready to start working on our HTML. So before I get started, let me actually connect my CSS and my JavaScript in here because I didn't do it earlier. And then I'll go down here and I'll add my script tag. And then I'm also going to use a live server. So I'm going to click on this. It's an extension. So if you don't have a live server in your VS Code, you can click on the extension icon, search live server. The one that I'm using is this one. All right, back to our HTML. So in our live server, you can see like just the text. So now let's like toggle between our live server and our Figma. And go into our mobile. Let's look at our mobile view. Okay, so what I said earlier was I see a header, a hero image, and a main content. So I'm going to set that up in my HTML. So because we want our HTML to be as semantic as possible, I'm going to create a header tag, and inside my header tag, I'm going to add the logo that we saw in our image file. This is a super, super big SVG, so I'm actually just going to import it with the image tag, and I'll give it the source, and I'll say SVG, and we'll give it some alt text of base apparel logo. And let's check our server. So there's our base apparel logo. And right now I'm going to just focus on setting up the structure of the page and not the styling, because this looks a little big compared to what I'm seeing here. So that's just good to know that I'm going to have to come back and edit it. So I'm going to give it a class of logo inside my image tag. The next thing I see is the "we're coming soon" and all this other text. And let's actually put this in the inspect tool. So because I'm on a PC, I can use the short key, the hotkeys Control-Shift-I, and then it'll take me to the inspect tool. And I'm on element, and I want to make sure that I'm on the smallest screen size here under responsive. So anyways, okay, let's create our main tag. And let's put everything before our footer inside our main tag. Okay, so we're starting to see a little bit of structure. And let's create an H1. So in our Figma file, we're seeing like a really large text. And to me, honestly, I think it's our H1 because it is so big and it's the only like headline on the page. And, you know, each page should have one H1 if it makes sense. And we only want like one H1 per page, but we're also seeing like some differentiation in styling here. So to keep going with our like semantic approach first, let's put this in an H1, this whole thing in an H1, and we'll create an inline element called a span that does not have any semantic meaning. So it doesn't break the flow of our page or the meaning of our page. So here we go. This is "we're coming soon." And then we have our paragraph in our form. So here's our paragraph tag. And we have our form content. So I'm going to put a hashtag for the action because we don't have any action right now. And then inside our form, we know we have this input, and inputs typically should have a label, and it's going to be for our email, and then it's going to have the text of email address inside. Then we'll create our input tag with a type of email. For the name and the ID, we'll give it email. It just helps to be consistent. And then I also want to give it an empty value for now and some placeholder text because that's what we're seeing in the design. So email address. And then we also need our button. So buttons have a default of submit, so we don't need to give our button a type, but it may be helpful to give it an ARIA label. Because if we look inside here, there's no like text, so it's just like a random button. And if I was using, if I was like listening to the page, I'd be like, why is this button here? So I'm going to say it's a submit button. If I can spell. And then let's go back and add all of our other like images. So we have our logo, but we also need to add our header. And because, not our header, our hero image. And because we know we have like two different hero images that we need to switch between, I'm going to use a picture tag. Our picture tag takes in a source tag, and it's going to hold our alternative media source. And our default media source is going to be an image tag. We'll give their, well, I'll start with the image tag. So we'll put our default image source here. We'll go to Hero Mobile. And to describe this picture, it's a woman in an orange shirt. So I'm going to call it a woman in an orange shirt. Okay. And then let's create our alternate. So it has this media attribute. So it's our media attribute is asking like, when do we want, what is the minimum amount of like pixels that we want before we switch to the source. So I'm gonna give it like 800 pixels is the minimum amount of pixels needed to switch between our from our default to our desktop. So let's add the desktop here. And if you're ever get stuck, there's the name. So okay, and so we can see we have our hero image and it's our default image. And like, let's say if we're on a bigger screen that is more than 800 pixels. Let me switch here so you can see it. It switches without any JavaScript or yeah, so our media attribute is kind of it's acting as our like a media query for this image. Okay. We go back into mobile view. Okay, great. All right, so we have our image. I also know that I may want to style our image later. I read somewhere that we should put our classes on the image attribute instead of the picture attribute. So that is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to give it a class name of hero-image. Great. Now let me go back to my Figma file. And let's see, we have our logo, we have our hero, we have our H1, we have our paragraph. We are missing the error stuff. So yeah, we're missing all that. So let's go back into our form And okay, so because I'm like reading this like from left to right, I know like the order of my elements should be the same. So if we go into our image file over here, we see we have an arrow SVG and an error SVG. So let's put those inside of our HTML because like they don't look too big. We can copy and paste them in. So for our error, which is our little exclamation point, I'm gonna put as our button context. And then for the, oh wait, is that, which one did I just do? I forgot. Oops, I put it in the wrong place. Let's put it out before our button. So sorry about that. So before our button should be our error. There it is. And then inside of our button should be the arrow. We can copy and paste that into our button. And what's great about SVGs is that they just scale with the browser. You don't have to set the aspect ratio. You can override it, like what we're doing with our image tag for our logo. But what's great about them is that they scale infinitely because they're based on math. And whereas like our hero image is a JPG file, and that's based on like pixels. So you need to be more specific about the aspect ratio here. Okay, and then the last thing I need to add is this error text, and I want it to be a part of my form because it's a part of my form functionality. So I'm going to create a paragraph tag with a class of error text. And I'm going to call it, inside the paragraph, I'm going to write, please provide a valid email. And since I added a class here, let's add a class to our error icon of error icon. Okay, great. So this is what we have, and I think that's all of our content, right? Yeah, so I think that's all of our content that we need for the mobile view, right? Okay, so yeah, I think this is good. So now we can get started on like the meat and potatoes of the challenge, which is the styling. Because it's like a beginner challenge, I feel like they didn't add a lot of functionality that they're asking explicitly for this. So I think the styling is going to take the longest. So we'll go into our CSS file here, and let's also open our style guide. So, and we have our Figma open as well. So let's just look at our style guide first and see all of the hints that they give us. So they're saying we should build for a range of sizes. So starting at 320. And I'm actually going to make this our max size today. But if you want to build bigger than that, that is going to be like a fun challenge. Yeah, so it's giving me an idea of like how the range of sizes I want to build for. It's giving me colors, and because they're giving me a set of colors to use, I'm thinking like maybe these are things I'm going to be reusing over and over again. Like we're seeing this color. I'm assuming it's like this desaturated color. We're going to be using that a lot. they gave us some gradients, and like just by looking at it, I'm gonna have to put it in my CSS to actually like see what colors they are. Right away, looking at my Figma file, I know the button has a gradient. So it looks like our button is definitely going to use one of these gradients. It's telling us our default font size. So the font size on the body should be 16 pixels. And then it's also giving us this font family to use, like the font family that they used here. Excuse me. And the font weights. So let's move this so that we can see our style and our CSS file. Let me move this over. Okay, so that we have more room. All right. And now we can start adding to our CSS file. So the first thing I want to do is import this this primary font family into my CSS. So to do that, I'm going to hold down the Control key and I'm going to hover this link and I'm going to click it and it should take me directly to Google Fonts. And I'm going to click on Get Font. And then I know I want to embed this and I want to use the import. So I just need this line in between these style tags. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it to the top of my CSS file and save it. So back in our server, nothing has happened yet. But what I do see is that we need, I see I need a CSS reset. So I'm going to create an asterisk and some curly braces. And inside there, I want to override the padding and margins. We can get rid of this space that's part of our browser default styling. So I'm going to say padding, 0, margin, 0. Great, so you saw that little movement, it's working. Okay, so now I want to create some reusable CSS properties at the root of our document. So I'm gonna call it, say, colon, root, and then curly braces. So you can create CSS properties in any like parent element and then reuse them throughout the children elements. And because I want to reuse these elements throughout all of my CSS, I'm putting it in the root. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna add our font family first. So let me go back to the Google. And I'm just gonna, I want this. So let me create this variable. So I'm gonna say dash dash primary dash font colon, and then I want to copy this part from Google Fonts and paste it here. So this is us naming our variable, and this is the value of our variable. When it comes to like naming variables, if I ever want to change this value, I want the name to be generic enough that it makes sense to the context of the value, but not like specifically Josephine Sands, because like if I get rid of Josephine Sands, then my like variable name won't make sense later and I'll have to change it throughout my CSS. And I really only want to change it once. So I want this to be the only place I have to change it in the future. And I'm going to do something similar for my colors too. So I'm going to say dash dash primary desaturated. Did I spell that right? Okay, yeah. And I'm going to just copy the value. And we're going to do that for the primary soft. So we're keeping like the design system in mind, I guess. And so if someone wants to change these values later and like replace it with like a different soft color, this might make sense. I'm hoping it will make sense in the future. Okay, and then we have our neutral, so neutral dark. And then I'm gonna copy this. And we have these gradients. I don't know what they look like at first, so I'm just going to create a generic gradient just to see what it looks like. So we're gonna just paste this here. I'm gonna delete the from and the to. Let's see, it gives us these colors that are really, really light. And let me look at the design. I cannot see the super light gradient. So I don't know if I'm actually going to use this gradient because I literally can't see it. And like maybe it's part of the background. So I know that there's a background pattern here. I'm going to just call it light gradient for now. And I will let you all decide what to do with this color. And then we have this gradient, which I'm assuming it has to be our button gradient because like, look at that. So I'm going to call it BTN for button and then gradient. And we'll delete the from and the to. And now we have our variables. Okay. Um, cool. Cool. Okay, so I think these are all the variables that I want to make right now. That I think I'll be using throughout this design, right? Okay, so the next thing we have are the font size and the font weights. So the font weights I'm not going to make as variables because I think, well, let's look at our design. We have this very, very thin font weight, which I'm assuming is our smallest font weight of 300. And then we have a very, very thick font weight. So that has to be our largest font weight of 600. And then we have our general like text. Um, Let me look at this version so you can see all of our text. So we have our general like text, which is like our mid font weight. So I'm going to assume that this is the 400. So I don't think I actually have to repeat myself that much with the font weights because I can see how I can just assign this as our body font weight, and then I can specify these two later. So let's get started on the body. So for our body, we have our font. Well, we have our font size that they give us. So let's start with font size of 16 pixels, which is, I think it's typically the default font size, but I'm going to say that explicitly just in case for other browsers. And then we have our font family. So now we can actually see our font. So let me save this and then let's go back to our server. So now you see our font family being applied here to everywhere except for our input. And then let's apply our font weight, which is 400. And that's our like generic font weight. The next thing we can style. So if we're starting from the outermost and from the top down, the next thing I want to look at is my logo, I think. Let me see. Let me see. Yeah. So next thing I want to look at is my logo. Um, so I'm going to save the margins and like spacing things for last because I find that it's easier to do it all at the end. So because if I'm doing it as I'm going through the design, I personally will forget that like, oh, I put this spacing here and then it's affecting something down there. And by the time I get down there, I've forgotten how this affects my content down here. So I'm gonna leave the margins and padding and things like that for last so that it doesn't like skew our general design first. And we can close our style guide, I think, now. So our logo. For our logo in our design, it's like slightly smaller than the default SVG sizing. So I'm gonna override it. So I'm gonna say that logo, and we're gonna give it a width of let's say 6M and see how that looks. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. And then the next thing we have is our hero image. So we have the toggle done, but we need to fix this. Like it should span the entire width of the mobile query. So yeah, because this takes up the entire space here. So let's give it an object fit. And for object fit, you need a fixed width and height. So let's say dot hero image, or defined one, not a fixed one. And we'll say width 100% and height 100%. And then object fit, we'll call it cover. And when we refresh, it's spanning that entire space and it's keeping the aspect ratio. Moving down, we have our main section. So if we look at our Figma file, it looks like everything is just like in a column and that it's centered. So I want to just align all of my main children element centered. So I'm going to give main, oops, where am I? Into the code, main, and let's give it display flex. And it will show you as I type this. And let's give it a flex direction column. And then let's just center everything. So horizontally, vertically, and then the text. So align, items, center, justify content, center, and then text, align, center. Great. So everything is centered now. What else do we need to do for our main? I think that's all we need to do to the parent here. Now we can go into the children and specify these things. So in our styles, in our Figma file, we can see that this H1 has like specific breakpoints here. We could add break tags to our HTML, but we can do that and we can create breakpoints with our CSS. So let's say H1 and we'll give it a max width. I think 15. I think 15 is good. Let's see. Okay, we're not saying anything yet. How about we capitalize our text here? So let's do that. Let's say text transform uppercase. Okay, we're seeing those breakpoints now. Great. And what else do we need to do? Hmm. Hmm. Oh, okay. So let's actually move this back into our smaller screen so that we can see that we're building to the design here. So we can compare it. Okay, so in our H1, we also need to, it looks like these are spaced out and we need to change the font size maybe, like maybe it's a little bit bigger. So let's give it some letter spacing first. Letter spacing of, like it's like slightly bigger. So like, let's see. Okay. Does this look? I think when I change the font weight, it'll come together better. And let's change the font weight. Let's give it a default of 600. Okay, that's better. Maybe the line spacing. And let's change the font size to 2.5. See, it's better. I think it's similar. I feel I'm definitely like guessing on the sizes, so create the sizes at your own discretion. Yeah, so those, I think that's good. And then, okay, something that I am noticing when I switch between these things is that this dark color is not as, like the contrast is lower. So I think that is where our neutral dark comes in. So let me create that color. Color, R, and then dash dash, we have a neutral dark. It's subtle, but it's there. And then I think we can move on to the span. So we'll say H1 span. And all I want to do in the span right now is change the font weight, because I'm seeing this color being repeated. So I'm going to add the things that I know are going to be repeated towards the end. So this is our smallest font weight. And I think that this is matching up. I think it's matching up. Yeah. Okay, so moving down, we have this paragraph. Looking at the paragraph and then looking at our server, I think the font is like just like a little bit smaller than our default, but like those might be my eyes. And then I'm seeing a difference in the line height. So I'm going to, it's like I know the body, the style guide said like 16 pixels is our font size, but like it looks smaller to me. It looks smaller to me. I am okay. You don't have to do the font size that I'm doing. I want to make it like a little bit tinier. You know what? No, no, we'll leave the font size alone because we know that the default font size is 16 pixels. So I'm gonna leave it alone. Yeah, and I'm gonna give my eyes a break. So I'm gonna say line height because we know the line height is different for sure. We see the spacing here. And we're gonna get the line height like it's bigger than the default. So I'm gonna give it 1.5. I think it's too big. I think the font size is too big. Oh my gosh. Let's make it this a little bit bigger because they're designing for this size. Okay, so now it's looking more like how the design looks because the 375 pixels is what they're designing for. So it's looking similar. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm changing the font weight. Not font weight. I'm changing the font size to like slightly smaller because my eyes are playing tricks on me. It looks like slightly smaller, but like honestly, I'm gonna leave that up to you. You can do what you want. Okay, so we have our paragraph and um let's see, what else do we need to do? Let's move on to our form. Our form is our next thing on the page, our next element. And so our form has a lot of overlapping elements, right? And because I know I want them to overlap and I want to be very specific about it, I'm going to use position absolute. And I know people are like, position absolute is like a no-no. You can use position absolute. It exists for a reason, and you can still have responsive design. So let's use it. So because I know I want them to be position absolute and I know I want them to be contained in the form, I'm going to say the parent is the form and the position is position relative. So let's say form and then position relative. Nothing changes yet. And then let's say, because I know the children are going to be position absolute, their parent must have like a defined space. So like a defined height and width. So let's say heights. Let's look at our thing. Um, let's say height is like 50 pixels. And we know that this size doesn't really change. Like if we look at our mobile view and we compare it to our desktop view, we know it doesn't like grow at all. And then we're going to indent the sides, but to avoid it being too much, I'm going to give it like almost the entire width. So I'm going to make it about 90% of the width. So it has like a little bit of an indent. Let's see what this looks like. So we're not seeing any changes yet because we're on the parent and we're not yet on the children. So let's do that. So let's select all of the children elements like this. And then say, well, let me get some space here. It looks a little crazy. Oops. And then say position absolute. And then all of our elements should be on top of each other. Okay. Yes, this is what we want to see. It looks wild, but we're gonna fix it. All right, so that's all we want to say there. And then let's just go in order of our HTML. So in our HTML, we have our form, then we have our label, our input. I think I want to do the button before the error because this position is relevant to this position. And then we'll do this last. Okay, so we have our label. So our label is specifically for accessibility and making sure that like our form makes sense. So I'm going to hide it visually, but it won't be hidden from like assistive technology. So what I'm going to do is say visibility hidden. So assistive technology should still be able to see this, but like I'm not going to see it right away, just like looking at the page. And then the next child I want to do is the input. So our input, if we look at our Figma form, oh yeah, this was hard too. This was hard for me too. Because like there's all these overlapping things. Um, so because our form is mostly just this input, I want it to be like the focal point and take up the entire space and height of our form. So I'm going to say input and I'm going to say height and we're going to inherit it from our parent. So now we have an inherited height, and then we want it to take up like the entire width of our parent. And I want it to be aligned to the left at all times. Oops. Okay, great. So now our input takes up the entire space. Um, I think our input is a little bit chunky, but I'm okay with it. Like, I think it's maybe it's a little too big, but I'm gonna keep it for now. Let's see. Let's actually let's solve our this border thing now. So let's set our border, or actually let's remove our outline first because we have kind of an outline when we click. You can keep this or you can style it however you want to style it. I'm going to remove mine. It's good to have an outline so that you know, like when you're clicking on something. I I know that I want to change this potentially. So for now, I'm going to say remove, or I'm going to say none for now. And then I want to set the border to that desaturated color. So I'm going to say 1 pixel solid, and then we'll use the variable that we created. So of primary desaturated, and then we see that because, yeah. And then actually, I think that the border is like a little bit less opaque than it is here. So I'm actually just going to go back and get this color. And I'm going to, instead of using the variable, I'm going to turn down the opacity by hovering the color and then just turning it down a bit. So I think it made a small, subtle difference. The next thing I want to do is make our border like cute and round. So I'm gonna create a border radius of 50 pixels, and we don't want our border radius to change, so that's fine. And if we go back to our Figma, we see that there's like an indented, the text is indented. So I'm gonna use text indent, and we don't need the indent to change. I'm gonna set it to 30 pixels. Yeah. Yes. I will go back and do the placeholder color later. For now, I want to change the font family of our input before I forget. So we'll use our variable. We'll say dash dash primary font. There we go. And is there anything else? No. So I think that is all I want to do for the input so far. And then I want to get the input placeholder and turn down the opacity slightly. So I'm going to say opacity and give it like something less than 1. It's very subtle, but it's there. Okay, I think this is all right so far. Maybe let me make it smaller. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so next I'm going to tackle the button because our button is like, to me, when I'm looking at this, let me go into the error version. I'm seeing like this space here, And it's a lot easier to set this and then set that because it's in relationship to this. And then this outline from the input is telling me that the button is on top of our input and it's like slightly over. So it's like slightly bigger than our input. So what I want to do, I'm going to go back into my code editor and let me switch back to my live server. So I'm going to, in my code editor and say button. Let's move it all the way to the right. And I need it to be a negative number so that it hangs off the side just a little bit. Great. And then let's see. What else? What else? Let me look. Sorry. There was something in here. Oh yes, so I think we're gonna be over an hour today because I haven't even gotten to like the end of our styling. So if anyone is interested, I can finish the styling for today, which may be about 20 or 30 minutes, and then we can do the JavaScript another time. I just want to know how everyone feels about time because I'm seeing that we are at the end of our hour already.
Yes, I think we can continue the design for
Okay.
today. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll finish the design today and then the JavaScript is very quick, but we can do that another day. Um, all right, so let's complete the styling. So our button is to the right, it's negative, and I want to add this little cursor thing. So I'm designing for mobile right now. So the cursor pointer like literally doesn't need to be in the mobile view. It could just be on like um, the desktop view, but just in case, I want this to be the default. Okay, so now if I turn this off and we hover, we can see that hover effect, that like button thing. Okay, so we have that cursor pointer situation. Next thing I want to do is I want the button to be slightly bigger than our input. So our input, which is inheriting the height from our form, which I set to 60 pixels. So I'm going to make it like slightly bigger. And I'm going to give it a set width as well of like, where's our mobile? I'm going to give it a set width of 70 pixels. And oops, where am I? Okay, so then we have our width and then um um yeah, and let me come back to the picture tag. Okay, so we have our width and we need to let's get rid of this border. So we have no border on our button. So let's say border none. So let's save that. And we know we have our linear gradient on our border. Oh, I forgot the border radius. Border radius, say 50 pixels to give it that cute round look. And then background, we want to set this background gradient. And I'm going to use background image for that. So I'm going to say linear gradient, and then we're going to use our var and say dash dash button gradient. Now we have our button gradient. Next thing I want to do is set the box shadow. Like if we go back to our Figma file, there's like a very subtle shadow there. So I'm going to add that box shadow. So box shadow, arrow is like horizontal, vertical, blur, and then spread. And then the last thing is color. So let's say there's nothing on top. And then 10 pixels on the bottom, or no. And then we want it to have this blur, and then our color, because we know that this is like opaque, I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier where I'm grabbing the color that I want. I feel like it's this color. Uh, yeah, I'm going to grab this color and I'm going to set it in my button gradient. And I'm going to just move it down slightly. Okay. Let's move it down even more till okay. Maybe that's too subtle though. So you can adjust this how you like it. Let me save. I can still see it. That's great. And now I want to work on the hover for the button. So when I hover over the button, I want to change the linear gradient the way they do in the here. So let's copy our box shadow and let's change this so it's like all the way around. And then let's change this to be like brighter. So we'll move the color towards the white more. We'll save it. And then when we hover over it, nothing is happening. What did I do? Oh, wait, this is the shadow, so you can't see what I'm doing. I need to get the background and set the background image. And I'm going to copy the actual value of the gradient. So let's go back into our button gradient. We'll copy this and we'll adjust the colors to our liking. Oh, okay, don't see anything yet. Let's move this here. And then we'll do the same thing for this color, slightly more, so it looks really bright. Save this. Oh wait, I just said button. I need to say button hover. There we go. Now we have our button hover. Another thing we can do is like scale it a little bit. So let's use the transform property and set it to scale, and then let's scale it up. So now it scales up slightly. And then inside of our button styling, we'll actually use the transition property so that we can define like the timing and well, we can define the duration and timing function for the box shadow and the transform. So I'm gonna say like 0.3 seconds. Let's use the ease function and I'll set it to my box shadow. And I'm gonna add a comma and do the same thing for my transform. Okay, so when we hover over it, we see that it's a little smoother. Cool. Yeah. Okay, so let me look. Um, let's see. Well, now I need to work on the error icons. So the error icon we'll do the error icon and the error text, and then I will check for time. Oh, we have to do margins and things. Sorry. So we have our error icon. It needs to be towards the right and down more. So I'm going to set it closer to our button, but I want there to be like a gap. And then I'm going to add the gap with padding. So let me go back into my responsive. And then let's look at the Figma design. Here we go. I think that gap is similar, is correct. Okay. And then let's do the text. So error text, and it aligns like underneath the input text. So let's move it down and indent the text as well. So let's use padding, top, and then see, so we're down, and now we need to use text, indent, or you can use margin if you want, because we're closer to the bottom. So I'm going to give it the same indent as our text, and now it's aligned perfectly. And now we can use that color, the primary soft. So let's say color bar, and then dash dash, very soft, and it's the color we want. All right, and then before we move on, I also want to create a class for this error around our border. So just so that we can see it as we write it, I'm going to create a class on our input and just call it error. And I'm actually going to remove this, but for styling's sake, I'm going to have it so that I can see it as I style it. So I'll say error. We're basically just changing the color here and the pixel size. So we'll say dot error, and then we'll change the pixel size a little bit, and then this will go from that desaturated color to the soft color. So now we can see that border. And now that I know that it works, I'm going to take this off of my HTML, and that would be something I would want to add dynamically. Let's see. I just want to check to make sure we are still good on time. I think I might need like another few minutes. I'll work on the grouped styling and then the margin, and then check for time again. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. Oh, right. Okay, so now that I know that my error icons and my error text and my error border is the way I want it, I'm going to set my error icon and my error text to have a default display of none so that we can toggle them on with our JavaScript later. And I'll just say display none. Great, and it still matches our design. Okay, and then let's see what else. So now we have that, and I want to do the margins now. Okay, so let's start from, let's look at the design. So I'm going to go in and then down. So here we see that there is like an indent around our header and our main. So I'm going to just apply some margin to our header on the left and right and our main on the left and right. So say header, comma main, and then curly brackets, and then say margin, we'll say 0 for top and bottom, and then like 1.5 m for the left and right. Let's see how that looks so far. Okay. I think it is indented the way we want it to. And now let's go into our individual elements and start pushing them down. So starting from the logo, we know we have a lot of white space around our logo. So let's push our margin on the top and bottom. So I'm going to say margin. Let's give it like 2M and then set the left and right to 0. And I think that is very close to what we want. All right, so our hero image is next, and there's a lot of margin bottom. Here, okay, so let's go into our hero in our CSS and say, let's give it a margin bottom of, I feel like it's a lot. So I'm gonna say 3 rem. And I think that is what we're looking for. Yeah, okay. And then what else? Let's look here. We have these inner elements that they're closer together, but there is some margin underneath the H1 and our paragraph. So let me go into the bottom and say H1. And then we want to select this paragraph. But in my HTML, I didn't give that paragraph a class, so I'm going to select it as not having a class. So I'm going to say paragraph, colon, not, square brackets, and, oh wait, no, not square brackets. And then square brackets, and say class. And we're going to give it, we need to put margin bottom. Margin bottom, it's not as big as our H1. They're like smaller. So we can give it like 1. Okay. I think this is, yes, what we're looking for. And then I also want to add the color. So our H1 span, our input, our paragraph that doesn't have a class, and our input placeholder. And curly brackets, and then we can call our color and give it the var of desaturated. Cool. Yes. So I think that is our mobile view. And I think this is a good place to stop for today. If we want to do another session, we can do the desktop view and the JavaScript later. I'm glad you've been enjoying this session. Someone asked about the picture tag. Mm. So the only reason I'm using the picture tag here is because I know that my hero image has different media sources, and I feel like it makes sense semantically for my HTML for it to go header, then picture, then main. And I can switch between these two sources with this media attribute that's acting like a media query essentially. So like when our screen size is greater than 800 pixels, we can switch between um, our mobile image and our desktop image. And there are other ways you can do this. Like you don't have to use a picture tag. Like if you know that you're gonna have multiple pictures that need the same class for some reason, but they have different media sources, maybe it doesn't make sense to use one picture tag. Maybe you actually need those different image tags and you can toggle them with CSS. Or maybe you need something that is like specific to the functionality of your page, and like you would want to have an event listener and set it to and listen to a resize event. But I think for this situation, because we just have these two images and they all stay in the same place, it makes sense to use a picture tag. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. This has been like the first half of our first ever live coding sessions. I do have some resources that I wanted to share with you before you go that I think, will just help you um, level, like get better at CSS and like just good practice projects and things like that. So I have some articles and websites that I want to share, and I'll share them in the chat now, that you can check out. And I hope that they will help you on your CSS journey. And I also wanted to share my like social media links if you want to connect with me so we can stay in touch. I'm also on the Frontend Queen Slack if you want to chat. So I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much for coming. I will share this portion of our project so far in Slack, and hopefully we can pick up in like the next few weeks. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jasmine, for this amazing session. You made it look very easy. I know when I was trying to do this and everyone was saying in the chat as well, it was really difficult, and now it made it look very easy. So thank you so much for
Thank
this
you.
very valuable session. We learned quite a bit. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you
Yes.
everybody for staying.